Welcome everyone to the 6th installment of the Senior Leadership Insight Series, sponsored by the Graduate School and offered today in partnership with the Department of Biomedical Engineering. My name is Melissa Bostrom, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development here at the Graduate School. The series was created and developed by a group of volunteers from the Graduate Board of Visitors, some of whom are joining us in the audience today. To make the most of our focused time together, I'll address a few logistics up front. We'll begin the conversation with 6 key questions that we ask each of our featured guests. And after that, we'll welcome your questions. If you'd like to speak, you can use the raise hand option accessible through the reactions button in the lower right-hand corner of your Zoom window. This session is being recorded, so if you prefer not to appear in the recording, please keep your video muted and you can share your questions in the chat. So with those details out of the way, I'd like now to briefly introduce Professor Fan Yuan, who is Professor of Biomedical Engineering and Ophthalmology and the Director of Graduate Studies for the Master's Program in Biomedical Engineering, as well as a member of the Duke Cancer Institute. His research interests include drug and gene delivery, mechanisms of molecular transport in cells and tissues, and tumor pathophysiology. In 2007, Professor Yuan was named a fellow by the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering, representing the top 2% of medical and biological engineers across academia, industry, clinical practice, government, and education. Professor Yuan, I'll turn things over to you to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Wood.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Our guest today for the Senior Leadership Insights series is Dr. Susan Wood. Dr. Wood has over 15 years of experience championing innovative clinical solutions to the marketplace from concept to revenue. She is currently the president and CEO of Vita Diagnostics, a leader in precision imaging for pulmonary medicine. Dr. Wood has shepherded Vita from bench to bedside with Vita's analytics and services emerging into clinical practice. Prior to Vita, Dr. Wood served as Executive Vice President of Marketing and Technology for the company Vital Images, and spent 8 years at another company, R2 Technology, where she championed the development, regulatory approval, and the commercial release of the first FDA-approved software product for automatic detection of lung nodules. Dr. Wood holds 8 patents in the field of computer-aided detection and quantitative imaging, and has authored numerous book chapters, peer-reviewed papers, and abstracts. She has been invited speaker for many conferences in the area of quantitative 3D imaging and computer-aided detection. She's also a member of the board of directors for the ICAD, a global leader in the medical technology, providing innovative cancer detection and therapy solutions. Dr. Wood holds a PhD degree from Johns Hopkins University, an MS degree in biomedical engineering from Duke University, and a Bachelor in Engineering degree from the University of Maryland, College Park. She chairs the Industry Advisory Board for the Department of Bioengineering at the University of Maryland, and is Chair Emerita of the Duke Graduate School's Board of Visitors. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome Dr. Susan Wood back to Duke virtually for today's conversation. I would like to begin the conversation by asking Dr. Wood a few questions. First, would you please tell us about your background and how would you describe your career path?
Well, thank you. And I should thank you, Dr. Wan, and thank you for the opportunity. And while I'm here as a past chair or chair emeritus of the Board of Visitors, I would like to thank Dr. McLean and Dr. Looney, who I think are on this call, for their support and, just quite honestly bringing me back to Duke, which has been a founding component of the last 10 years of my life, to be able to come back and be a part of the university. So I think this is an extension of that opportunity, but I want to shout them out as 2 of my very favorite people on earth. there you go. As far as my background and my career path, it's having been in now a practicing biomedical engineer for decades, and I started out just by I worked for the government, for the Army, and wanted to integrate computers in medicine. That seems, maybe like some far-fetched now, but a number of decades ago, that was unique. And I started on a path as a mechanical engineer and soon realized that my passion was in biomedical engineering. And really the hardest or the most complex structure was the human body, and how complex that was, and be able to put my engineering skills and my ingenuity and my passion into biomedical engineering was really what started and jump-started my career into this area. And quite honestly, is the difference between me being an engineer today and in another field. If I had not found biomedical engineering, I don't think I would be an engineer today.
That's great. Thank you so much. My next question is, can you tell us about some of the organizations you have worked for which hire professionals with a graduate degree, and describe some typical roles for them?
Yeah, I think that all of the organizations, or my most previous organizations, have always hired graduate students or those with a graduate degree. And in particular, I've found a path or a lane for graduates, PhD students or masters outside of the academy. And I think it's a very important lane for PhD students, master students to be able to define, and also to be able to explore and exploit, because in the era of data science and the era of biomedical engineering, these skills that you learn as a graduate student are essential in industry now. And there is a definite role for all kinds of disciplines, but particularly the STEM disciplines in data science practice.
Are there any difference between master degree and PhD degree, the difference in the roles for them?
Well, I think that there's certainly a difference in the training, but the opportunity, I think, is still the same. I can give you my examples. We hire PhD students, PhD graduates outside of the academy, definitely into our research and development or components of our organization. And we do this, almost by rule rather than exception. It's a very important component of building an organization. I think from a master's degree, they're just from some of my background, some of the master's degrees that we've hired have been in the area of public health policy, regulatory. I recently helped a Duke graduate that was in a regulatory role get an opportunity with one of the big Silicon Valley regulatory consulting firms out here. Those are the kind of the master's programs that we mostly hire into the organizations I've been associated with. But I just think that in either discipline or in either lane, there is a continued opportunity for graduates, trained people outside of the academy.
That's great. This is very useful information for master students, since sometimes they get confused about what they can do in the industry after they graduate.
If I can just add on to that a little bit, and I can relate this back to my training. I think an engineering discipline as an undergraduate is a fantastic platform. It's a platform piece by which you can build off and go into many different areas. You can be a med student, you can go into a further engineering discipline. From when I arrived at Duke, I was a more generic engineer. I left Duke as a biomedical engineer. And that is a building on that engineering platform or foundation and putting that into a discipline or a sector that I wanted to go in. And I would not have been able to go to my next level in the path if I hadn't built on that foundation. A lot of times depending on the undergraduate program, you go deeper into some of the STEM curriculum as a generalist engineer, and you can build on top of that as a BME. And that's the path that I chose. And that is the path that built me and made the difference in my career of going into and being. I still consider myself a BME, even though I'm running a company. I always introduce myself as a BME, but making that transition for me as a BME is absolutely what Duke, the empowerment that Duke gave me to do.
That's a great point. My next question is, what do you see as the value of graduate training that has added to your professional trajectory?
Yeah, so I built on a little bit of the same. Again, solidifying the engineering fundamentals was imperative. Okay. And also, but adding that biomedical trajectory. I think, that the graduate component of it has definitely added, just to the research and the analytical skills. I still use those skills daily,
Yes.
more than, so that you've learned in this kind of discipline and training. And I think that so that's kind of the more practical, the disciplines, but also, I think that my graduate training, both at Duke and at Johns Hopkins, was also related to the environment of that training, right? It allowed me to think of the grander view on what is possible.
Right.
And so that's maybe a nuanced part of the training, but it's absolutely, and I think that essential component of the training, and that what an opportunity like Duke gives you is to think, you have your discipline, you have your program, but you also have an environment where you can think outside of the box, and you're encouraged to think outside of the box, and you're encouraged, and you can find your grander view. So I've been very consistent with this when I've talked to Dean McClain, et cetera, but Duke for me was my springboard to find what's possible. And I still, I still take this with me today. Yes, it's taught me the engineering disciplines, but it also gave me an environment to think outside the box.
Yeah, that's a very important. Yeah, I really agree with you. This is I have another question we have asked all the leaders about. Are there any skills, trainings, or experiences you wish you would have in graduate school to prepare you for the current career path? Yeah, so there are a couple here, and one is, I think, this lane of having being a PhD with a lane outside the academy, and that doesn't disparage the lane inside the academy. I just think that there's more opportunities for graduate students, many more rather than fewer. So a couple of things that I wish that I had, right? So one is, I often spent my time as a graduate student and, by myself in the lab at night. And that working in an industry environment is generally not like that. It's more, it's more collaborative. You have to be in teams. You have to, I think that you generally are a subject matter expert in your field as a PhD, for example. Being a great leaders are often great teachers, right? So you have to be able to have that expertise, but also to be able to teach that and influence others. No, I don't think that's specific to the industry, but it's really an imperative part of what you're bringing to industry is your subject matter expertise, and being able to work within that team and teaching the team and raising the boats, raising like all the levels of that team. So I think that's one key point, is being able to work more collaboratively in a team environment. And and the other is a little bit more practical, but a lot of tech entrepreneurs
are, also run companies, right? Your general engineering curriculum or your STEM curriculum does not give you the financial component of this. So whether you're in the academy or outside the academy, you have to learn how to put a budget together, to put a strategic plan together. And that strategic plan has to, we call it the song, right? You're singing a song, you're having a vision, you have a vision, but your song sheet, which is, or the financial model, has to match the song, right? And that's that sort of song sheet component of it. I learned on the street, if you will. That's the piece that would have been really helpful to me in my graduate programs.
Yeah, you mean this is all things you learn in the graduate program, or this is something you learn?
So the things that I learned afterwards, that if I had the ability, I would incorporate or give the opportunity for graduate students, is the ability to work in teams.
Yeah.
And to be able to kind of teach the members of your teams and raise the understanding of your individual thought leadership,
Right.
and also just the practicals of strategic finance.
Right.
Those are the two pieces that I think were the most missing.
Right. Do you know, do you have any suggestions how we can improve our graduate education to include these important skills for the future success in your field?
Well, I'm going to throw some flowers to your dean here a little bit, because she's been incorporating this component into the strategic plan of preparing the graduates for a potential lane outside the academy, and what the differences and working in programs for I think for certainly the time that I've been at Duke. So you'll see some of these programs, I think, and the availability or the ability for students, whether it's directly in their curriculum or if it's within clubs or having the opportunity to work in an environment that is kind of adjacent to their curriculum, if you will. I don't know about the finance piece. I would just encourage every entrepreneurial minded student or otherwise to have a finance course. Duke will give you the opportunity to take that course as part of your curriculum. If your advisor doesn't like it, then tell them you're an entrepreneur or tell her you're an entrepreneur and take it. But I think even if it's a MOOC or something similar, it's a really important skill to have.
Okay, that's great. And then my last question is, how could students prepare themselves if they like to work in your field?
Yeah, so one of the, I think the key initiatives that for all alumni groups, for example, and are that they want to bring their alums and be, and connect to the students. So it's more of a seamless transition from a student to an alum, for example. And this is a great network. It is a great network. And I would encourage the students to find that network, to use the network, and be persistent, recognizing that people are busy. But I would say that even though you have a lot of busy Duke alums, for example, by and large, they're always willing to help. So be very, very persistent. I'll give you a little example that the current, I think still current chair of the Board of Visitors is a very busy guy, and Ron Temple. And I introduced him to my son a couple of years ago, and he still helps him out. I mean, he helps him with his career path. My son is working for another Board of Visitor alum, Peter Munoz now. I mean, these are connections and a network that helps, whether it's directly or indirectly. Use that network, and might get pushed back initially, but the persistence will definitely be rewarded. So I think that's be persistent. Use your alumni groups. The alumni associations are definitely have outreach programs here to do that. And I think that the other component I'll just reiterate is to make sure that there are tons of opportunities outside the academy that you can extend, and people within the industry in general through different social media connections that people will respond to you.
Do you have any advice about specific preparation for your industry?
For my industry,
Yeah, your field, like imaging, diagnosis.
I think that, and I
What kind
just,
of people you like to hire?
sorry, I missed that.
Like, it's like what kind of people, students you like to hire if they have certain preparation? They were
So I think one of the biggest challenges in our industry, and challenges are opportunities, are that we have in medicine, you have a clinical understanding, and those clinical problems are being solved by data and analytics, and those two components have to speak the same language. Okay, this is really the intersection of biomedical engineering. So I am absolutely banging the drum here for the biomedical engineers of the world. Being able to talk both of those languages is a really an important component of how we use big data, how we use AI to be transformative in clinical medicine. And a data science alone or a clinical person alone, those two components have to meet, and they have to be able to talk the same language.
integrate them together.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. That's all the questions I have for you. Thank you very much for answer all these questions. We have one question from registration. What are the pros and cons of being a woman in your career?
Okay, so that's, well, I can't say that's the first time I've been asked that, but it's a really important, I think that, again, going back to a lot of my training, I'm very analytical by my training, and the data show that women tend to be better team builders. They show greater empathy, which is a great leadership skill. But I think the really important component of this is that being a leader, a woman leader in a position that can hire and promote women leaders equivocates. It makes that playing field a lot more level. And the data show that when women enter the workforce, almost after the first, into the first promotion opportunity to a manager, they start to fall off in numbers. Okay, so what's initiating that, or what's responsible for that? Some of it is going into motherhood, and some women take off, and when they come back, their earning potential goes down. So I think to have the understanding of, and to have the support to know that you can have the empathy and understanding for that position, but also to be able to promote equally is really important. So that's the disadvantage. Are, again, I'm going by the numbers here, and this is a longer discussion that I'm always happy to have. But in my area, we're a venture funded company. The fundraising is in the single digits in medtech for women founders and entrepreneurs. It's really very low in comparison. It's very difficult to find a board of directors, again, so that is more diverse in the field, because a lot of the funds that are funding you are largely non-diverse. They're largely male dominated, so they'll sit on your board. So you'll have a board of directors without the diversity that will have the similar understanding of how you would think in a different way. So there's sort of we're kind of encased in a monolithic kind of look, when we really need for women to be able to thrive in this field. You need to have better opportunities for funding, and I think more diverse support groups, including your board and your investors.
That's great. Thank you so much for the information. I think this is very helpful for the female students to look for careers like you to be the leaders.
Well, I would,
in the industry.
again, going back to we're all busy and that sort of thing, this is a passion of mine, and I'm happy to take, if people want to link in, if I can help, I will. But I'm very happy to help as best as I can, the particular STEM educated women and to advance their career.
Thank you so much. Melissa, do you see any questions from chat?
I do want to open things up to questions from the audience here. Did we have anyone who wants to ask a question live?
Hi, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so hi, Susan. Thank you so much for a really great conversation. I wanted to ask, what are some common mistakes that you see for recent hires, specifically those, again, in the field with either masters or PhDs coming in at these entry-level positions? What are some common mistakes that you see that they make when they first start off working in your field?
Do the hires make?
The hires make,
Or-
yes.
What are some of the mistakes? You know, I think that this has been a really interesting couple of years. Okay, so and we've had to hire into largely a remote environment, which is I think unusual. But since you asked recent, the recent hires are, I mean, the recent issues are kind of the inability to come in and for managers to be able to relate to the people that they work for, or that work for them, and just to change the way that they communicate in a remote environment. So I just, that has to be one of the obvious things. I think that one of the, in a more general way, some when they come in, when people come in and don't, this is, they worry too much about owning something rather than sharing. You know, that's the piece that you have to break away from being, I think, a graduate student to being in a team environment. But we really train our management teams to help people break away from that, you know, sort of knowledge is power kind of thinking. But so I think that's one of the bigger issues is training them to be able to share their knowledge and knowing that sharing that knowledge means that they can make a broader impact.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Clay. We're glad to have you join us. Well, I want to thank everyone in the audience for your engagement today. And it's been such a delight to feature Dr. Susan Wood and her experience and leadership path in this conversation. And I want to give a special thanks to Professor Fan Yuan for conducting the interview today. We look forward to seeing many of you for future events in the Senior Leadership Insights series. Our next session will be in January 2022, and will feature Dr. Chini Krishnan, who is CEO and co-founder at GetInsured.com. Good afternoon, everyone.